When poll numbers show that 77% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, don't think the president's economic policies have done a good job, that they've actually increased their cost of living.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Grab a seat, because this one is a good one. So here's the situation. CNN's Kaitlan Collins sits down with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and basically asks him the one question he clearly did not want to answer. Is it really a smart idea to start prepping a brand new bill with a sitting president's face on it while families are squeezed at the gas pump and the grocery store? What follows is a panel showdown, Scott Jennings digging in on one side, Xochitl Hinojosa pushing back hard on the other, with Hakeem Jeffries throwing in a line that absolutely lands. Things get sharp fast. Stick with me all the way through, because the back half is where it really tightens up, and the strongest moment is one you do not want to miss. And before we get rolling, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are tuning in from. I love seeing how far this community reaches, so say hi. All right, let's get into it.
The Trump administration is preparing to potentially put President Trump's face on a commemorative $250 bill to mark the nation's 250th anniversary. According to the Washington Post tonight, which obtained this mock-up of what that bill could look like, there are two political appointees within the Trump Treasury Department that have been pushing the office that is in charge of printing money to start making prototypes. If you're thinking, wait a minute, it's illegal to do that. Yes, there is an 1866 law that prohibits any living person from appearing on U.S. currency, but, of course, we're in Washington and Congress could vote to change that. I questioned the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent about this earlier today. You said that it's up to Congress if the president's face is on a $250 bill, but it is actually the Washington Post that's reporting two political appointees from the Treasury Department who have asked agencies to be ready to do that. Do you think politically it's a good idea to put his face on a $250 bill when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries?
I don't really understand this Washington Post article. That who hears from the Post? Yep. Terribly written, terribly edited, because basically what it says is that Treasury is following the law and that we've created the bill and that it's up to Congress, but that we follow the bill and it's up to... I didn't really understand what the story was.
So
but anyway...
appointees aren't involved in that, two of your political appointees?
Yeah, of course, but we prepare for everything if it gets passed. Just like we were ready 6 months in advance for the one big beautiful bill for tax guidance. So we have to prepare in advance. You can't draw something up the day before.
Politically, do you think it's a good idea, though, when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries?
Look, I think it has. I think that it's bifurcated. That do you think we should have a 250th anniversary, the celebration?
Well, that's happening anyway. But putting the president's face on a $250 bill is a choice.
But Kaitlan, it's not happening anyway. It's happening because it's being funded by private citizens, by the federal government, by state governments, by municipal governments to celebrate our country. And I don't think that there's anything untoward about having the President of the United States, the person who was President of the United States, on the 250th anniversary bill.
My political sources tonight are Xochitl Hinojosa, the former DOJ Director of Public Affairs, who I should note her sister is running as a Democrat for governor of Texas, and also Scott Jennings, who does not have any siblings running as Democrats for governor of Texas, but is the former special assistant to President George W. Bush. Scott, I'll ask you what I asked the other Scott who was in the briefing room today. Do you think politically it's a good idea to put the president's face on a $250 bill right now?
I mean, I think they ought to follow the law, which Scott Bessent clearly laid out. You can't put a living person on money right now. Now, the Congress could vote to change that. And it is right for the Treasury Department to be ready to follow the laws that Congress passes. And I kind of agree with Scott Bessent. If we're having a 250th anniversary, the government's going to do all kinds of things. They've already minted some coins, I think, to commemorate the 250th anniversary. So, putting Donald Trump's face on it wouldn't offend me. I'm sure it would offend people who don't like Donald Trump. I don't think it's the most pressing issue facing the country right now, but would it surprise me if we did some commemorative items around America 250? No, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Would you criticize President Biden if he had been in office and was putting his face on money?
Look, we put the image of the President of the United States on all kinds of things in this country. It doesn't really bother me. They'll name things after Donald Trump. They'll wind up naming things after Joe Biden. They've named things after Barack Obama. It doesn't offend me one way or the other. And I really think this is a bit of a tempest in a teapot, but I can see why people who don't like Donald Trump like it, because, they don't like for his face or his name or for him to be on anything. And so it's another thing for them to complain about. I also think Democrats generally don't want us to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the country. And so they're like offended that we're celebrating America right now. And it's another thing for them to be offended about.
Xochitl, you're the Democrat here.
No one is Democrats want to celebrate the 250th anniversary, Scott, and you know that.
This is the part that gets me every single time. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, gets asked a simple question about whether it is smart to put a sitting president's face on a brand new bill, and his first move is to attack the reporting. He says it is terribly written, terribly edited, and you have to understand what that really means. When someone cannot argue with the facts in a story, they go after the writing instead. That is the oldest trick there is. But here is the moment the whole thing falls apart. Kaitlan Collins points out that it was his own political appointees who pushed for this. And what does Scott Bessent say back? Yeah, of course. He just confirmed it. He spent half a minute trashing the article and then admitted the central claim was completely true. You cannot make this up. And then it gets even better. She asks him point blank if this is a good idea while regular people are struggling to afford gas and groceries, and his answer is that it is bifurcated. Bifurcated. That is a fancy word that means I do not want to answer your question. When a politician reaches for a $5 word to dodge a $1 question, you know they have nothing. Then Scott Jennings jumps in and calls the whole thing a tempest in a teapot, and I want you to sit with that. Here is what people do not realize. This country was built on the idea that we do not put living rulers on our money. That was deliberate. The founders looked at kings who stamped their own faces on coins and said, no, we are a republic, not a crown. That is why our currency got symbols of liberty instead of one man's face. So when a panel waves this off as nothing, they are waving away a choice the country made on purpose.
I think one interesting thing about all of this is that this isn't the first time. We've seen Donald Trump obsessing over putting his name on the Kennedy Center. He wants to ensure that while his approval rating is at 30%, the reality is that he himself is obsessed with his own image. And so I think, Kaitlan, your questions were spot on in the sense that the American people are struggling every single day. $250 is what it costs in some areas in order to pump gas. A lot of Americans can't necessarily afford it. And the fact that they're now going to have potentially, unless Congress changes the law, a commemorative sort of $250 bill of Donald Trump is just going to remind them every day about how expensive life has been under Donald Trump.
I want both of you to listen to what the Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, had to say about this today.
It's monopoly money. It's fantasy. And we are going to do everything possible to make sure that this never happens. I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. How sycophantic are Republicans when this is what they're focused on, as opposed to actually doing the type of things to address the damage that they've done to the American people. They said they were going to lower costs on day one. Costs haven't gone down. They've gone up. And yet they're focused on a 250 make-believe bill for Donald Trump.
I guess, Scott, to the point that he's making there, you know, when poll numbers show that 77% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, don't think the president's economic policies have done a good job, that they've actually increased their cost of living. How do you think they'll see a moment like this from Republicans on Capitol Hill?
Look, I think we often connect things that aren't connected. They're talking about the concept of making a commemorative item for America's 250th birthday. Whose face is on the money does not change the value of the money. It doesn't change anything about the economy. It doesn't change anything about the cost of groceries or gas or anything else. It's a picture on a piece of paper, and Democrats are, engaged in their biggest skill, their biggest talent right now, which is to be outraged about everything. I have no idea if the Congress is going to pass this, and if they don't, I won't care. And if they do, I won't care either. But it won't surprise me that the government took steps to do something to commemorate the 250th anniversary of our country. But to say we're going to put a face on a piece of paper and that somehow has an impact on the value of that paper as it relates to the overall economy, I mean, that I know Democrats are economically illiterate. I didn't know they were that economically illiterate.
Now this is where it really heats up. Hakeem Jeffries comes out and calls it monopoly money. He calls it fantasy. And honestly, he is not wrong. Because think about what is actually being prioritized here. He points out something that should stop everyone cold. Costs have not gone down. They have gone up. That was the promise. Lower costs on day one. And instead, the energy is going into a commemorative vanity bill. And then Kaitlan Collins drops the number nobody on that panel wanted to hear. 77% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, do not think the economic policies are working. Let me say that again so it sinks in. A majority of Republicans. That is not a partisan talking point. That is people on both sides looking at their grocery receipts and feeling it. When your own base is telling you the economy hurts, you cannot just spin that away with a party. And how does Scott Jennings respond to all of that? He says Democrats are economically illiterate. He actually doubles down and says it twice. And this is the part that blows my mind. A real family is sitting at a kitchen table deciding between filling the tank and filling the fridge, and the answer from the panel is to insult the people pointing it out. Here is what you have to understand. Calling someone illiterate is what you do when you have already lost the actual point. Xochitl Hinojosa was talking about real struggle, real prices, real anxiety, and the comeback was a cheap shot. When the strongest thing you can throw is an insult, you have quietly conceded the substance. That is not winning the argument. That is a deflection wearing a suit.
I mean, the reality is that it is sending a signal to the American people that they care more about Donald Trump and his ego than they actually care about providing anything and making their lives easier for them. And I think that is the main point that Democrats are trying to make. I agree with you, Scott. I think we need to commemorate the 250th anniversary. At the same time, it should not be all about Donald Trump. This is not just about Donald Trump. There is more than the 250th anniversary. And so I think that at a time when Americans are struggling, you'll continue to see Democrats trying to talk about those struggles while you have Donald Trump and Republicans rising costs and thinking about things like putting Donald Trump's face wherever they can.
Scott? I mean, Hillary Clinton, as she was
look,
pointing it out today, was saying, you know, when responding to the article, was saying that's how much it's going to cost to fill up your gas and get groceries by the end of the president's term. Obviously, that's Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump's former political opponent, saying that. But her point was to the cost of living that is the very real reality for so many Americans right now.
Look, I don't have anything to say about the $250 bill beyond what I've already said politically. I will just say, though, deep down, somewhere inside of me, my uber conservative is screaming, let's not print any more money at all, because every time we print more money, it makes the value it makes the value of it go down. Lord knows the Democrats spent and printed a bunch of it during the Biden years, and that's what caused the inflation crisis in the first place. So maybe we could all agree, let's just print a little less money and make it worth a little bit more. How about that?
You should call the White House. They'll listen to you, Scott. Tell them not to print this, not to go forward with this $250 bill.
And here's the line that nails the entire thing. Xochitl Hinojosa says it is sending a signal that they care more about the president and his ego than they care about making people's lives easier. That is it. That is the whole story in one sentence. Because a bill is not just paper. It is a statement of priorities. And when the priority becomes whose face gets printed instead of whether families can breathe at the end of the month, you have told everyone exactly where your head is at. She makes another point that I really respect. She says it should not be all about one man. And you know what? She is right. A 250th anniversary belongs to 250 years of people. The soldiers, the teachers, the immigrants, the inventors, the ordinary folks who actually built this thing. Turning that milestone into a single portrait shrinks all of it down to one ego. It takes a celebration of everyone and makes it about one person. Then Scott Jennings does something almost funny. He suddenly remembers he is supposed to be a fiscal conservative and says, let us not print any more money at all, because printing more makes it worth less. And look, on the economics, fine. But notice the move. He could not defend the vanity bill on its merits, so he pivoted to a completely different argument to avoid ever saying it is a bad idea. That right there is a tell. And Kaitlan Collins closes it perfectly. She tells him, you should call the White House, they will listen to you. Tell them not to go forward with this. It was a clean, smiling little knockout, because everyone watching understood the subtext. The people who swear they hate wasteful spending are the exact ones cooking this up. So here is where I land. This was never really about a celebration. A real anniversary lifts up a whole country. This one wanted to lift up a single face. And when people are counting every dollar at the pump, asking them to stop and admire a portrait might be the most out-of-touch thing I have seen in a long time. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.